Incubation centers play a very crucial role in the Indian startup ecosystem. But sadly, there is not enough information available about the functioning of incubation centers and what role do they play in the upliftment of the startups in the Indian economy. Today, we have with us Mr. Rajesh Joshi, who is the former CEO of Atal Incubation Center, GIM, Goa Institute of Management, and he'll be sharing his experience of working with an incubation center and what role does an incubation center play in the functioning of the Indian startup ecosystem. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hi.
Rajesh ji, the first question that I have for you is, what is an incubation center?
So that's a good question. And a lot of times, I started business way back in 1999. Us time incubation centers India mein nahi the. I think incubators have grown in the last 10, 15 years. And incubator, as you can know, it's inspired by from the babies when babies are born or when the premature baby is born. Doctors keep those babies in an incubator. So the inspiration is that word, incubation. So this is the same kind of function which incubation does. Like जो भी startup है या एक business people want to do business, they come to an incubation center with an idea. So and that's what the incubation center does. So this is the word why incubator naam hai. A lot of people get confused. What is this word incubator? That's why I was saying why this word incubator is used. So basically incubators are based in academic institutions. They are privately there. So आप incubation center में जा सकते हैं. Incubation center generally provide 5 main broad areas of assistance support to startups or to people with ideas. हम incubation centers give physical infrastructure in the sense if somebody wants an office space, then we give that. Incubation centers give that. Or somebody wants some technology, some 3D printing tools or any technology. If a startup या एक business idea जो technology oriented है. So a lot of academic institutions like IIT, scientific institutions, they have incubation center where they provide them the machinery. So first is आपको physical infrastructure मिलता है once you go to an incubation center. Second is incubators also play a very big role in giving you access to funding. So they have different investors in the panel. They know different investors. They have a lot of government schemes through which they support and provide seed capital or even growth capital in some cases. So the second services which incubation center provide is access to funds, access to finance. Third is incubation centers normally are based in academic institutions or few institutions where they have a great business experience. So they provide access to knowledge, access to mentorship, access to subject matter experts. Because some of the times आपका नया business है, you don't know something about the subject, your subject, or suppose you don't know something about legal, compliance, accounting, finance. So you go to an incubation center, वहाँ पे आपको access to knowledge through subject matter experts or through the knowledge of the incubation center. You provide this. Fourth is access to market. Once you want to आपको आपकी product, service or solution market में बेचनी है, तो incubation centers have a network where they have worked in the different markets or they have a different experience. So आपको they provide something called access to markets. Incubation centers nowadays are doing great work in terms of doing different events, different festivals, different hackathons. So वहाँ पे you get opportunities to network with people. So basically 5 services broadly every incubation or any incubation tries to provide startup, anyone with a business idea. First is a physical infrastructure. Second is access to finance. Third is access to knowledge, subject matter expert. Fourth is access to market. And fifth is through events, through programs an incubation center does, they provide you access to networking opportunities.
Okay. Rajesh, the Indian startup ecosystem has received great boost in the Modi term. From 2016, the Startup India initiative happened, and the government is currently looking to bolster the startup Indian ecosystem. So what role does the government play in establishing of the incubation centers and funding them, and how does the government play a role in incubation centers?
Yeah, I think the government has done a phenomenal job. I think we are close to 400 incubators in India, which by the way is very less than it should be, because in China there are 11,000 incubators and in the US there are close to 2,100 incubators. So we have a lot of work to do. But still the 400 plus incubators in India primarily are fueled by the government schemes. So there are different government schemes through which academic institutions or private institutions or even quasi-private, quasi-public institutions can become incubation centers. And you're correct, in the last 8 years, the propelling of the incubation center is primarily due to the government schemes. So there is a Department of Biotechnology scheme, there's a Department of Science and Technology schemes. Then obviously there is Atal Innovation Mission, which was made under the aegis of Niti Aayog, has done a phenomenal job of setting up AICs, Atal Incubation Centers, across India. And they were actually the leading, you can say the government department where new AICs were formed, when new incubation centers were formed. So that's AIC. Startup India is doing a great job of the existing incubators. They are giving them seed fund schemes to invest in startups. So even Startup India has propelled it. And Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, under its aegis and through the Niti Startup Hub, they are doing they are also propelling a lot of startups through incubators. So yeah, the government has done phenomenal. But as I said, India में अभी तक सिर्फ 400-450 incubators हैं, and China is already 11,000 incubators. So we still have to do a lot of work, and I'm sure that a lot of incubators will come very soon.
Rajesh, you mentioned about the incubation centers and initiatives taken by the Indian government for the establishment of incubation centers. I would like to talk about the Atal Incubation Mission and the Atal Incubation Center, which was envisioned under this Atal Innovation Mission, under which the Atal Incubation Center was envisioned. What's the difference between a normal incubation center and an Atal Incubation Center?
Well, primarily there is no difference in terms of the services which we offer. Obviously, when you are running an Atal Incubation Center, you are working under the guidelines of the Atal Innovation Mission, and they have certain guidelines which we follow. So I think so there's not much difference in terms of the services which an incubation center offers. But obviously, when you're funded, when you are governed by a certain guidelines of a government institution, you need to follow those guidelines.
Okay. Rajesh, since you have been the former CEO of Atal Incubation Center, Goa Institute of Management, how has your experience being heading an incubation center? What are the key topics or some key points that you would like to share with our audience on how does an incubation center help a certain startup?
I think my own admission as a CEO at AICGIM, where I worked for kind of two plus some years, is that it was a very fulfilling job because we did help or we did propel some of the startups. But at the same time, and maybe it's true for most of the incubation centers, we are normally very shortly staffed. I mean, the manpower to do the kind of work which we want to do, the kind of mandate which we have, we're normally shortly staffed. It was also the reason that people didn't look at incubation center as a career. So I will urge people who are there, who have a bit of interest with startup, innovation and idea, you should look at a job in an incubation center because we are shortly staffed. So when you're shortly staffed, you probably can't do as much. But I think whatever we have done, and I always say that incubation centers are kind of the unsung heroes of the startup ecosystem because we do so much, but there is so much more to do, right? I mean, you have 20 startups who are incubated with you. Possibly you can't do justice to all the 21s or can't do enough for all the 21s because everybody has a different requirement. आप समझ सकते हैं वो 20 businesses आपके premises में लोग कर रहे हैं, हर एक की expectation और हर एक की उम्मीदें अलग हैं. So sometimes you can't come true to that. Sometimes we get funding from the government schemes, and sometimes that funding get delayed for different reasons. But we face the brunt of it. So you can say that we get we get normally the brickbats of being an incubation center, and we are probably not as appreciated. So I really thank TICE and the entire team behind TICE to do something about the startup incubators, because I'm just like me when I was working with AICGIM. हमने जो भी काम किया है, probably just within our premise, and it has not gone to the national level. But I think a show like this, what you guys are doing at TICE, I think you should do something more for these incredible incubators of India because we are really doing some stellar job. And I think these 400 plus incubators ने I think close to 25-30,000 startups को propel किया है, fund किया है, mentor किया है, and within this 400 incubators, probably the team strength will not be more than 4,000. So you can see that 5,000 people working in the incubation industry, and I'll love you all guys who are in the incubation industry. The kind of work these 5,000 people have done for the entire nation, and like you rightly said, propelled the startup economy is phenomenal. I think you guys should do a show on incubators of India.
Definitely, Rajesh ji. We would like to cover the incubation centers across India and cover what are the challenges that they face, how they function, and how they are actually the unsung heroes, as you rightly mentioned. Rajesh ji, you mentioned that a lot of the incubation centers are not are understaffed and they are not working as much as they would have liked to propel the Indian startup ecosystem. I'm sure the Indian startups that are coming to the incubation centers, they are also facing certain challenges that you guys are working on and solving them. So, what are the criteria for a startup to get incubated at an incubation center, and what kind of benefits are they looking for at an incubation center?
Like I said, basically, incubation center provides 5 major services: physical infrastructure, access to finance, access to knowledge, access to subject matter expert, access to markets, and through the events, hackathon, challenges they organize, and networking opportunity. So that's the reason why you go to an incubation center if you need any of the 5 services, or all of the 5 services, or 1 or 2 of these 5 services. Beyond that, I think so to your question that what are the criteria of an incubation center? So every incubation center has different criteria. Some incubation centers which are based in technology institutes, the criteria is the startup should be in technology. I was running an incubation center based in a management school. So our criteria was what are the different courses we are running so that our students get opportunity of internship in this kind of startups. Sometimes we are based in Goa, so we looked at whether the what is good for the Goa economy. So we looked at that. So every incubation center has different criteria. I will urge all the startups, when you look at an incubation center, look at why are you going to an incubation center. Aapki requirements kya hai? What are the 2, 3, 4, 5 things which you need from an incubation center, and then only apply for that incubation center. Lot of startups make mistakes sometimes to not choose the right incubation center. And similarly, a lot of incubators like us would have made mistakes of not selecting the right startup which we can help better.
Rajesh, you have mentioned great points for the startups and incubation centers to keep in mind while they are selecting each other. Rajesh, you have also been a serial entrepreneur and you have had previous startup ventures. What is the difference? Were there incubation centers in existence or certain organizational structures such as incubation centers in the past? And where do you see the future of incubation centers is?
So that's a good question. Like I said in the earlier part of the interview, that I wish when I started my business in 98 and I did businesses till about 2014, 6 different startups, there was no incubation center around. So I think the incubations, and I did most of my business in a tier 1 city or in a metro called Mumbai. So that the physical space is the most costliest thing, right? Now, obviously, the co-working spaces have also come, which is, like you can say, a factor of incubation center. So that's the first thing which is a major difference, because आप business चालू करते हो, सबसे पहले आप सोचते हो business में you can obviously start from your bedroom or garage, but at some point of time जब आपकी team बढ़ती है, you need physical space, not just physical space to have your team working from there, but also you get a networking opportunity because different other businesses are also different startups are also present there. So that's a big difference. I think if I would have, again, legal, though I was a management student, I knew a bit about legal, finance, and compliances. But there are a lot of tech startups or technopreneur startups. उनको legal, finance की कुछ ज़्यादा knowledge नहीं है, accounting की knowledge नहीं है. So those are things which incubation center have. So I think incubation center have been the catalyst of change in this country, in India, in our Bharat, where incubation center have been a catalyst and have become an enabler. Some businesses which would never have gone beyond a laptop, beyond a pen paper, these incubation centers have taken those businesses ideas and have put them on a strong foundation. So that's the big change which I've seen. First, like you rightly said, as an entrepreneur to now be an enabler of the startup ecosystem, that's a huge change. Like I said, the future, 11,000 incubators in China, 3,000, 2,000 plus incubators in US. We are still at 400, 450 incubators, right? So definitely I see a lot of more incubators coming. I see a lot of educational institutions who still are probably at ESL level to start an incubation center or start a center like a launch pad or something for their students and also for the community at large. So I think the incubation center is just going to go up, and that's why again guys should do a feature on incredible incubators of India, because there are some stellar incubators out there. And just to mention, Atal Innovation Mission has also come up with a ranking framework for incubators where they evaluate you based on certain guidelines, which has been a super thing because it just gives people like us, because if you realize incubation is also a new business or a new institution in a country like India, so there is no precedent. क्या कैसे करना चाहिए काम, क्या करना चाहिए, क्यों करना चाहिए. So with these guidelines, it also helps incubation centers to kind of come up with better ways of working or better processes.
Rajesh, you mentioned that the population of India is great, and 400 incubation centers are not probably enough to cater those. What do you think are the major reasons why India does not have the required number of incubation centers that it should have had? And what can be done better to promote and establish new incubation centers?
I think it's also the awareness, right? So normally an incubation center, like you correctly said, the 450 plus incubators which have come, I think 300 would have been propelled by the government of India. 300 incubators are directly related to the schemes of the government of India, including DBT, DST, Startup India, Atal Innovation Mission. Like I said, being a former part of Atal Innovation Mission, I've seen their way of working, and they do some stellar job. Mighty Startup Hub is doing a great job. But I think probably we need more government organizations, like probably an MSME government, and like IDEX, the DRDO department, the Ministry of Defense is doing some stellar job in propelling more incubators in defense. And I think the industry is always kind of a laggard in India. So if you go overseas, you'll see a lot of private industries or corporates running their own incubation center. I think every corporates or every blue chip company in India should have an incubation center. So that's missing. So I think again, I think government does a stellar job, is almost at the pinnacle, is almost at the forefront of a lot of changes in the country. But I think the private sector takes a while to come. Second is, like I said, academic institutions. They are the fertile ground to have an incubation center. You have 400 to 1,000 students in your university. Every university should have an incubation center. And I think over there also the National Education Policy, which was released last year, they have done a stellar job again to bring incubation center within that thing. So Ministry of Education has also is doing a great job in propelling incubation center. So I think we'll reach there. Private plus the government efforts have to come in. And also incubation centers in India have not evolved as a business model, because like I said, mostly either we are working under the government schemes or we are privately funded. We are not looking as an incubation center as a business as such. In countries like China and US, people have made incubation as a business model. So I think entrepreneurs like whoever is listening and people like me or people like whoever is around, they can look as incubation center also as a business. So I think these three things will make the incubation number grow.
Rajesh ji, you rightly mentioned that the educational institutes around India could be the breeding ground for these incubation centers. So what's the process if an educational institution that is interested to have an incubation center right there in their educational institution? What's the process for them to get an incubation center in their organization?
I mean, I will say it shortly because this requires another show because it's so broad. But first is the inclination. It always starts from the top, right? I mean, there has to be, one is a policy guideline which comes to the Ministry of Education or wherever the accreditation is done by the educational institution, where it becomes mandatory for some to have. But some private institutions should also look at it from their board level, that do they need to have an incubation center here? I mean, for me, it's not that do you need to have, you should have an incubation center there. Not only for your students, but to kind of, even for your faculty for that matter. There could be professors, who have wealth of knowledge. They would want to, like in the US, if you see, most of the professors are also starting their own company while they are teaching. So I think that trend should also come in India. I think when this trend comes, educational institution will want to have an incubation center, and I can see it happening. But yeah, the pace of which happens is kind of slow. So educational institute, I'll just complete the point, though we need another show for it. Is like educational institutions can apply for government schemes, which are incubation schemes. Second is most of these private institutions are also backed by industrialists. They can go to their corporates or industrialists and say that, hey, that we need an incubation center to propel not just our students to start up, but also for our faculty. So that conversation should happen, and I believe that conversation would be happening at least across 100, 200 institutes in India. So that's the two ways where incubation center educational institution can start.
Rajesh ji, thank you for sharing these insights. And I'm sure the startups that are wanting to go to incubation centers will be encouraged by listening to our show and insights from you. The last question before concluding this show that I would like to ask is, these incubation centers that are across India, for example, Atal Incubation Centers and other incubation centers in India, what's the amount of funding that a startup can expect from these incubation centers? I'm sure there are various lookout points on which it's based. But if you can give a rough idea of how much of a funding can a startup expect so that they can be prepared and be ready to ask for it.
So again, like I said, that most of these incubation center have got the money from the government schemes. Some are also privately funded. The amount of funding which a startup can get, if you have a idea, so you get some money for proof of concept or to develop a product from an idea, which can range between 1-2 lakhs to about 20 lakhs. So like I said, there is 5 different government schemes here. So but broadly 2 lakhs to 20 lakhs. It's for people who have who want to just make a proof of concept. आपके पास एक idea है, वो idea को लेके आपको एक product बनाना है, उसके लिए आपको 2 से 20 लाख की funding, seed funding जिसको कहते हैं, वो मिल सकती है through this incubation. Then there is a bit of scale funding. Like I said, Startup India scheme or the Samrid scheme of Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, they have this scheme where they are giving fund for growth. So that can range between 20 lakhs to about 50 lakhs. Yeah. So that's the thing. And then there are some incubation centers, like MET University does a stellar job where they have their own fund, where you can get funding up to even 1 crore. Okay. And that's for scale startups, for growth startups.
Okay. Thank you, Rajesh, for sharing the wonderful insights for our audience about what an incubation center is, what does it facilitate for the startup ecosystem and the startups present in India. Thank you for coming on TICE and sharing these expert insights with our audience.
Thank you. And I think, like I mentioned to you, you guys should do a series called Incredible Incubators of India and probably feature one incubator every week. And I think that would be another stellar job you would do for the unsung heroes of the startup ecosystem.
Definitely, Rajesh, we would be glad to cover the unsung heroes. As you have mentioned, the incubators in India are doing a very excellent job in promoting the startups in India, and I'm sure they would continue to do so.